Hey, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Programs broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, May 5th, 2022. For those that might be new to our broadcast, if you're attending live, this is a broadcast where you can enter in any live questions or topics that you want me to discuss. We'll always take pre-submitted questions, and those can be sent to us at any time at webinar@evoketherapy.com. So we collect those throughout the week. Whatever's left over from the previous broadcast, we bring here, and then any time we have for live questions comes up here. For those of you listening, the important thing to remember is, although I might be asking at times a very specific programmatic question, or a question that's specific to somebody's very personal issue, the goal is to understand what are the principles involved. So much of the work that we do at Evoke is about developing a new sensibility, learning how to think about our problems, our challenges, our questions. Because one of the things that I've learned as a client over the years is when I don't understand the thing, the psychological concept that I'm struggling against, I don't even know how to ask the question. But by asking the question, it gets us into a dialogue where we can kind of pull it apart and look at the landscape of what's involved in the question and the answer. So that's a little bit of information on the front end. So I'll take the pre-submitted questions first. Becky will collect. Becky's moderating for me this evening. She'll collect questions that you send in and pass them on to me as the evening goes on. So let's go with question number 1. Somebody writes, I understand most clients don't go home after wilderness therapy. I asked my therapist his thoughts on what it is recommended when they do go directly home. Curious about your thoughts. At some point, everybody has to go home. I mean, that's just common sense, right? And so really the decision for you is a couple of things. When are you ready? When I listen to a parent considering taking a child home, I look for a couple of ideas in their thinking. The first thing I look for is if it's simply about the child is fully cooked, the timer's up and the meal has been prepared, I worry a little bit about this idea of being done, of being completed, that the child is quote unquote ready to come home. Because in many ways, it's about the family system being ready to come home, which includes the child, of course. They're part of that system. But it also includes the parental readiness. When I hear parents say, I'm ready for this to happen, and I know, the biggest thing I'm listening for is, are they ready for things to go sideways and backwards? Are they ready to utilize the skills that come up when the child struggles, when the child displays old kinds of behaviors or patterns, or even the beginning of old patterns or behaviors? When people talk about it in those terms, I have a lot of confidence. When people talk about it in very simple, binary ways of pass or fail, good or bad, ready or not, that's when I worry a little bit about it, because any therapeutic intervention, including outpatient therapy, or more specifically to your question, wilderness therapy, is not the solution, not the end of the equation. It's getting some momentum, getting them ready, getting the family in a different place, giving some tools, some experience, some awareness raised. And then it's about carrying the momentum forward. Now, typically we talk about 12-step groups as an option for both child and parents. We'll talk about, of course, personal therapy for both, and maybe even family therapy. I've spoken about this many times. I'm not a big fan of the behavioral contract, because I think a lot of people use behavioral contracts thinking that somehow that will prevent the struggle. The kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that I say is, I've never seen a child in the history of my career who, when they violate something in a contract and the parent points it out, the child never says, oh, I agree. I see right here, clearly, number 4, I violated, and I see the associated consequence. I think I deserve that. Right? There's always rationale. There's always the discussion. There's virtually always a debate. And I think a lot of parents think that if I can get the child to agree to it, we don't have to fight those fights anymore. And I think the very idea, the very fact that parents hang their hope and their hat on that idea is itself a problem. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be difficult. Of course, I always tell people, if it goes much better than I'm predicting, that's an easy thing to adjust to. Nobody's ever called me and said, Brad, it's going a lot better and easier than we thought. And we don't know what to do about that. Nobody's ever called me and told me that, again, in my career. So prepare for the difficulty. I love it when parents will say, my child did something small or even big that they used to do. And it's not about that, they'll tell me. But really what they'll focus on is I have a different response to it. I have a different awareness to it. I didn't go to a dark place. I didn't give up. I didn't resort to my old ways of coping. So the behavioral contract is just one aspect that I'm not a fan. I'll give it to people if they ask for a template, but I'll teach them this. The other thing, just to make this point, if a child signs a contract while they're in treatment, in legal terms, and I'm only using this as an analogy, but it's true, that contract would never hold up in court because their freedom depends on them signing it, right? They have a kind of a metaphorical gun pointed at them saying, sign this contract or you can't go home. And so they'll say, I signed it under duress, or I had to sign it to get home. And if a judge were looking over the case, the judge would agree with them. The judge would say, this contract is null and void because it was signed under duress, under coercion, under threat of consequence. So we can't really hold it accountable. So I like the behavioral contract if it's a tool for the parent to get clear. I think what the contract can do is flush out some issues, help you prioritize things. I also think what that can do for a parent, ideally, it doesn't always work this way, is it gives you the confidence that you've communicated clearly. Because one of the things that causes self-doubt in us as people and parents is when our child says, I wasn't clear on that, or I didn't know it was like that. If you have the contract, if it exists, even if it's not posted on the refrigerator, if it exists and you went over it, you can have the confidence and not doubt yourself that you weren't clear, or you didn't lay things out clearly. So it's about getting momentum. It's about having a different kind of attitude. As strange as this sounds, and I'm going to overstate it just to illustrate the point, as strange as it sounds, you guys, the shift between pass or fail, that paradigm, to I'm a work in progress and my work is done when I'm in a box. Sorry to be dramatic about it or graphic about it. That's what treatment is. I said this week. I wrote something about this week, and this is as abstract as I will get on this question. But there's truth in it, and it goes back to those two paradigms. I wrote this week, I said, the work in therapy is not about getting better, getting gooder, right? The work is about knowing that you're crazy. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. Knowing that you're human, that you're flawed. And I think most of us, because we grew up in a paradigm where the goal was to be good or healthy or right or successful, we kind of look in the world in that pass or fail kind of way. But enlightenment, to use the term that broadly applies to kind of more awareness, enlightenment isn't about should or shouldn't. Enlightenment is about seeing the truth. And the fact of the matter is, you and I have codependency. Where we fit on that continuum, that's for you to discover. You and I have some trauma in our background. Maybe it might be milder than others, but we have some. You and I have tools, ideas, concepts that are unhealthy. We have habits that are unhealthy. We're human. We're fallible. And psychotherapy is really about embracing the mess. The subtitle of my book, The Audacity to Be You, is learning to love your horrible, rotten self. It doesn't say fixing your horrible, rotten self, or getting rid of your horrible, rotten self, or not being a horrible, rotten self. It says learning to love your horrible, rotten self. And so, again, I listen for a different kind of thinking than the pass or fail, good or bad, all or nothing kind of thinking. I look for a parent, and there's the things I mentioned with therapy, 12-step, those kinds of things. Use at your discretion. Use what's valuable for you. Make sure you're doing your work. If you were going to write a contract, have a contract for you. What are your triggers? What do your relapses look like? What does your regression look like? What are your triggers and red flags? That would even be more powerful for parents to work on than for their child. But you know why we don't talk about that in our field? You know why we don't mention that? Why that's not, that to me is the most obvious thing you could say to somebody, is because so many of the people in this profession aren't focusing on their own work. They haven't done their own work, and so they don't know what it looks like. And parents are resistant, just like children are resistant. We're all resistant, or there wouldn't be such a thing as therapy. And so we kind of tiptoe around the parent's ego, right? It can't be about them. It can't be about their work. And of course, we end up not with the solution, but we actually end up with the problem, with pathologizing and focusing on the identified patient. So that's a lot of concepts in there, but those are some of my thoughts. All right. Somebody writes, this is a longer question. So somebody writes, in my obsessive work on myself, reading The Drama of the Gifted Child, can you speak more on the following? Alice Miller, the author, she is suggesting that as parents, we will wound our child. Not maybe, but that we will and we have. She also says, speaks to the role of the therapist, and for therapists, but now that is decades later, can parents offer the same to our children? She's speaking to therapists. Is this applicable to our children? Can we help them mourn and integrate? Can we apologize for how we have wounded them? As I do my own therapeutic work, I can see now with horror some of how I have harmed my child. She has a tiny, mighty paragraph on addicts looking at to reenact or re-experience the intense feelings of their childhood with the help of drugs or alcohol. Would you be able to speak to this given what we know about addiction? Dense material that you're looking at. Great job. Let me kind of go to these one at a time. The idea is, there's so many parallels between being an effective, what I call an adequate therapist. That's my highest compliment to a therapist, is to be adequate. I might say to a parent that might be the highest praise I could give to a parent, to be an adequate parent. Somebody once said, I think it was Donald Winnicott said, it's really about being a good enough parent. It's that idea about being human, not being overtly toxic and overtly abusive. But what Dr. Miller is trying to teach us in this landmark book, the most important book, in my opinion, written about child and families and child development, is that we have to embrace human. Throughout the book, she talks about different diagnoses in different cases. And in each case, the defense is built around protecting the person's sense that they're not good enough, their badness, their horrible, rotten self. So she's just saying, look, we're all human. No parent is perfect. Every parent dents and bruises their children figuratively, speaking metaphorically, not literally. And part of showing children how to be a person, to be a human, is yourself becoming a human and a person, which means a whole person. And a whole person has genius and beauty and idiocy and ugliness, right? Sometimes you're wise and generous, and sometimes you're scared and stingy. Sometimes you're enlightened and insightful, and sometimes you're dense and unaware of yourself. That's the goal. It's not about fixing people up to be good or better. It's about having them make peace with that. And then when you make peace with your authentic, what she describes as your real self, you don't need defenses anymore to protect you, because there's no threat. Because that's what a defense is. I know this is fairly complex. If you're new to this, I apologize, but it's a dense question and a dense book. Of course, we can help our children mourn and integrate as we mourn and integrate. And of course, we can apologize to our children and how we've wounded them, but it's not a destination. I was just telling somebody this recently in an intensive. It's not about saying you're sorry the one time. That's just evidence of an attitude where you can be fallible. You want to teach your children accountability? Be accountable for your 2% of the problem. You want to show your children how to own their stuff? Own your stuff. You want to show your children what it's like to be human, to be a person, to show up and apologize to somebody? Apologize to them. But it's a way of being. Don't think of it as a destination. And by the way, most of the times when we apologize to our children in this process, they blow it off anyway. It's okay, they'll say, or whatever. And if we say it a lot, they'll definitely say whatever. But the idea is that we're in a different kind of, it's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift out of good and bad, right and wrong, and into self, being a person, which is never perfect, never pristine, always fallible. You'll recognize it when you read the enlightened folks that have walked on this planet and written about it. They will talk a lot about their fallibility. They will talk about how they bumble, how they mess it up. You know, Gandhi, people have told me, don't quote Gandhi. Don't talk about Gandhi so much. I talk about him because he's not threatening to most people's religious paradigm, because he did so much outside of religion, right? But Gandhi is, he was great at saying, I'm a scoundrel. People have said to me, well, there's reports that he wasn't nice to his wife all the time, that he was even mean to her, and he would be the first one to tell you that that's true. You see, he's not trying to put himself out as this perfect person. Somebody came to him and said, I want to know how to get off sugar. It's a famous story. And he told the person, come back in 2 weeks. And the person came back 2 weeks later. And he said, now I can sit with you and advise you on this. And the person said, why? Why did it need to wait 2 weeks? He said, because I myself was on sugar and I didn't know what that was like. And I had to feel it for myself. So I had some sense of what you might be going through, so I could connect to you on a human level. In the movie Gandhi, where Candice Bergen is playing a reporter and approaches him at the end. This is based on a true story. She says to him, she asks him a bunch of questions, and he says, the hardest battle in my life wasn't the English. It wasn't even my own people, although they were a little bit more challenging. The hardest battle was with me. But he said, but what comes out of that battle is because I know that I'm a scoundrel, I have so much more love and compassion for all the other scoundrels. Do you see the shift? It's not about being good. That's the disease, not the solution. That's what eating disorders are about. That's what obsessive behaviors are about. That's what defenses are about. A defense, by its definition, is a metaphorical wall that we put up to prevent people from hurting us, and because we feel threatened by them. And like I said recently, safety, I'm going to say this clearly and slowly because it's really important. Safety is not the precursor to treatment. Safety is the treatment. And what people are doing with, you wrote about this later, the drugs that they use, this idea, like in Johann Hari's TED Talk, you want a great talk about addiction, look at Johann Hari on TED Talk, and he talks about everything we know about addiction is wrong, is what he says. And the concluding statement is, at the end of his 14 minutes or so, he says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And he tells wonderful stories and cites beautiful research to illustrate that. But that's the conclusion. And in many ways, the chemicals that people are taking are trying to give them, they're trying to get the feeling that's been missing in their life, most likely from a deep, profound, fundamental connection. Right? They want to feel that dopamine rush, that good feeling. You drink and you take drugs and you feel at one with the universe. You take psychedelics and you look outside and everything makes sense. Everything is a pattern. You take alcohol, you drink alcohol, you're not afraid. You can talk to people of the opposite sex, right? Or of other genders. And you're not worried about it, because that's what it feels like when you feel safe. That's what they're seeking. And that's his point. He doesn't say it in the exact same way that I'm saying it. I'm saying it much more explicitly than he does, but that is exactly what he's teaching. So, yeah, I think I've addressed most of the questions to that one. Somebody writes, our 19-year-old son attended Evoke 2 years ago, followed by a therapeutic boarding school. He's now a freshman in college and continues to smoke pot regularly and parties excessively. He's due to come home for the summer, and we're having a lot of anxiety and are scared. His past visits involved a lot of conflict over his pot use. Our boundaries for him staying in our home are no pot use inside or outside the home. Although he verbally committed to abiding by it while he was staying with us, we don't believe he will actually follow this. We've told him yesterday that he can't stay with us over the summer. What followed was a lot of FUs from him. It feels horrible to do this. Part 2. I'm afraid we're causing more trauma to him and even more of a rift in our relationship. On one hand, it feels if we let him come home, we're traumatizing ourselves and our younger son. But if we don't let him come home, we're traumatizing him. My biggest fear is that it will push him to do heavier drugs, since he will be sitting around all summer, bitter and resentful, feeling rejected by his family. I'll say a few things about this. I'm not a fan of zero tolerance. I don't. It doesn't make a lot. It feels very unsafe. I believe that every parent, every person has a right to say, this is what I will allow in my circle, my house, my environment, my close proximity. I don't want alcohol here, or I don't want drug use, marijuana use. Everybody has a right to do that. And I will fight for that right for every parent, every person, to set the boundaries that they feel good about. But I think you're also recognizing that there's something about this battle over substance use that's creating a rift. And that's something that can be explored with him. It's also not about, I think what my best guess, I could be wrong, but my best guess is that what he's reacting to is not the boundary. He's reacting to his thought and experience and feeling that you're setting the boundary to try to control his pot use. And boundaries aren't for fixing other people. If I had an alcoholic wife, and I don't, but if I did, and I set a boundary that I'm not okay with drinking, I can't have it in my life, it would sound something like this. Think about this in the context of marijuana and this young man coming home for the summer. I would say to my wife, her name is Michelle. This is hypothetical because she does not have a drinking problem at all. I would say to my wife, you can drink if you want. In fact, I've spent the first 20 years of our marriage trying to manage and control your drinking, and it's none of my business. I'm learning in my own therapy, in my own 12-step work, that to control your drinking is to be in my disease. So you can drink as much as you want. You can drink yourself to death if you want. But here's what I can't have in my circle because it's triggering for me. So I'm not going to try to control your drinking anymore. In fact, this is me letting go. But what I am going to try to do is protect my circle, my space, so I feel well. So if you were to ask me this question and you haven't, would I advise you to tell him that he can't use or not? I don't have an opinion about that. I really don't. It's not up to me. It's not even within my range of thoughts that I have about people. It's just what works for you. But I think what he thinks is you're not setting a boundary to take care of yourself. And there's probably history in this dynamic that I'm describing that I'm guessing at or hypothesizing at. I think he still experiences you as trying to manage his life. And his relationship with marijuana is none of your business. It's only your business if he brings it into your life. And you can set whatever boundary you want. And you can also relax whatever boundary you want, if it's okay with you. If it feels okay for you, with you to do that. That's my best guess, is that something else is going on, because the fracture and the conflict and the response, it sounds too much like what I'm describing. People in recovery for codependency, which is a disorder associated with being the family member of a person using substances. Doesn't have to be that, but it's associated with that. People in recovery from codependency don't learn the right boundaries to set. They learn the boundaries that they need. They don't learn tricks of the trade to teach people lessons. They don't learn how to more effectively manipulate the people using substances in their life to get them to stop. They learn to give all of that up, and they learn to take care of themselves. And my guess is The reaction from your son is based on a history and old stuff and his unconscious sense that you're trying to stop him from using. And it's none of your business if he uses. The only thing that's your business is your boundaries. You could say, if you wanted to, you could say, if you have a dirty drug test, I won't pay for school. You're allowed to do that. And the question would be, are you trying to manage his drug use? Or does it just not feel good to you? Those are two very different sensibilities. So that's my thought. You cannot control him, and you can't control him from getting into more drugs. That's what we have to let go. See, we talk about letting go a lot. Letting go means letting go of the things you can't control, not letting go of what you can control, which is your boundaries. But you're not responsible for his drug use. You're responsible for your healthy behavior or not. Hope that makes sense. Somebody writes, while on my path to authenticity, I find myself thinking of myself, my wants, my needs, and setting my boundaries, my goals more than ever. Me. I feel like it's making me more narcissistic and isolating me from others. It seems to be so hard to find a balance between self-focus and other focus. Do you have any thoughts on this? I have a volume of thoughts on this. Couple of things. Most of us have been trained to focus on ourselves is selfish and self-centered and narcissistic, and it's not. Narcissists don't feel good about themselves, or they don't hyper-focus on themselves because they overvalue themselves. Narcissists feel empty inside, and they think that the only value to themselves is how they appear to others or how they show others their greatness, because they've been unconsciously internalized the idea that their goodness, their worth, their lovability is based on what they have accomplished in life, their resume, so to speak. So narcissism isn't feeling too good about yourself. Think about the Dalai Lama or Gandhi or Yoda. They don't talk about themselves all the time, but what we know about them is they wouldn't compromise themselves to take care of somebody else in a way that was unhealthy. See, love is something you have extra of. Love isn't giving it out to be good. Love is about having extra energy. You have to have a full belly. Codependence, of course, because they've been taught to focus on their needs, is selfish and narcissistic. That's the disease, not the solution, right? And they're triggered when people say, well, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are your needs in this situation, right? That's exactly what you're describing. That's training. That's cultural conditioning. Healthy people, enlightened people, gurus and mystics are very clear about what they need. I had a client say to me one time, he said, Brad, I got in a fight with my young adult son. You know, he was giving me a lot of feedback and talking to me. And I tried to be like the Buddha, is what he said. He said, I tried to be like the Buddha and have compassion and deeply listen to his pain. And I said, remember this. I'm going to tell you a story that's real, that's true about this. The Buddha would meditate if he was empty. He would selfishly, narcissistically, so to speak, go take care of himself first so that he could be there for his son. You were doing it because you should. And when we do things because we should, we will abuse other people or ourselves. I was one time co-hosting a parent weekend with a Buddhist monk. We took turns teaching all weekend at a treatment program years ago. And it was the second day, and it was after lunch, and it was 2:00, and we were supposed to get started with our next session. And I turned to the administrator of the program and I said, "Where's the monk?" And they said, "He's in the back meditating." And I could see in one of the back offices, the monk was sitting in a chair meditating. And I'm like, wait a second. It's 2:00. It's 2:10, 2:15. I'm like, why isn't he here? Why are we all waiting on him? That was so selfish of him. He could have planned ahead, right? But the monk knew that if he didn't get right, he had nothing to give. Love is about giving when we have it, not about giving because we should. That's serving the ego. That's narcissism, actually. So when you learn to take care of yourself, you won't become more selfish. You'll become capable for love for the first time in your life at the deepest levels. We set boundaries and we do self care, not because we're selfish, but because it serves us. And then we're capable of being there for our children. We go to meetings to deal with our pain, our sadness, our worry about our children. We feed ourselves there by talking to people, by venting, by complaining, by crying, by doing what we need, so that when we come back to the child, we can be present for them. But yeah, people are going to call you selfish. Your conditioning is going to tell you you're selfish, but it's the opposite. It's everything is the opposite. And with a closer, more nuanced and critical look at life and people, you can see it. But our cultural conditioning is so loud that when we set a boundary and we drop the ball, see, healthy parents need to learn to drop the ball more with their children. That phrase, one of the things I tell people never to say to a child is, I would only do what's best for you. I would only, everything I do for you is out of love. That's just not true. You're not a saint or an angel. You're a human being. And it's like putting your own mask on. I mean, that's the answer. It's putting your own mask on. Why do we have to watch that video over and over again when we fly? Secure your own mask first, because our conditioning would tell us put it on the child first, or the woman sitting next to us, our mother who's aged and can't put it on because that's a good person does. Well, guess what? As you know, you fumble around putting their mask on, you pass out, you're both dead. But you put your mask on first, now you're available to other people to help them. That's the simplest analogy that there is. And I could talk about this for the rest of my life because I know it. It's part of my battle too. It's all of our battles. Somebody writes, this work can be so all-encompassing and demanding. If you really wanted to, you could do the self-reflection podcast, books, intensives, journaling, therapy. And therapy could be the only thing in your life other than work, family, and regular responsibilities. How do you set boundaries with the work in your life so that you actually have a life? Stop doing those things. Stop listening to podcasts and reading books and going to therapy if it's too much for you. You know, it took me a while to get there, but I go to therapy on Fridays at 11 local time. It's the easiest hour of my week because it's the 1 hour from 11 to noon Mountain Time on Fridays that I can't get it wrong. Because in that room for that hour, the goal isn't to be good or better or even healthier. The goal is to be me. And when I can be me, I am good and healthier and better, so to speak. So if it's burdening you, slough some of it off. If you were my client and you said to me, this is feeling draining to me, first of all, I would say, I'm so glad that you told me that. Because that's the truth in this moment. What do you need to do for yourself? Well, I think I just want to go every other week. I would say, great. Do you see how easy it is to be with that kind of a person who lets you be yourself? So if it's too much, if it's stressing you out, stop doing it or cut it back. Take care of yourself. And if people try to talk you out of it or tell you you're not working hard enough, that's the disease, not the cure. It's so easy for our brains to turn everything into a should. I'm going to say something and it's not going to, if you know it, you know it. If you're getting a glimpse of it, that's great. But for the average person just beginning this process, it'll make no sense. It'll seem like some random idea. Should is the problem. Should is the name of the dragon we must kill. There's no should in this work. There's just not. Because should is about ego, about you being good. And good is the opposite of being who you are. And good is, I don't like the word selfish, but if something's selfish, being good is selfish. Being human is courageous. I just watched the Truman Show, so if you haven't seen it yet, I haven't watched it since it came out. It came out in 1999, I think, and I watched it with my two adult children just this week. And watch that. It's what I'm teaching you tonight. It's a metaphor for this guy who wants to go outside of what the culture allows and discover everything. It's not about being happy or safe or good. It's about being a real person. That's the heroic journey. That's what the myths are to teach us. The myths are trying to teach us about transformation, deep, fundamental transformation. In business, they would call it a paradigm shift. I remember learning about paradigms in college, right? When the world started changing from analog clocks to digital clocks, the Swiss were slow to respond, right? I think it was Japan and other countries that were getting on this trend of digital clocks. They flooded the market and took over a large part of the Swiss market share for watches and clocks because it was different. It was something other. When rap music first came out, somebody asked Pete Townsend, he's the guitar player for The Who, the band The Who. Somebody said to him, "What would you say to these rappers coming out today?" And Pete Townsend said, I wouldn't say anything. I just would get out of the way. Right? When Steve Jobs was breaking the rules, right? Creating a phone that nobody thought could. Steve Jobs said to the guy at DuPont, he said, "I need a glass screen that is touch and pressure sensitive, that doesn't scratch when it's in my pocket with keys, and that doesn't crack easily." And the guy at DuPont said, "That doesn't exist." And Steve said, "I need you to invent it." That's the thinking, right? Outside of the paradigm. This is not my broadcast and Evoke's model. It's not some one technique. I'm fine with lots of techniques, endless amounts of techniques. But this work is about transformation. That's what the Truman Show is about. It's about a transformation. It's a metaphor for our lives. That's what the movie Rocky, the movie by Sylvester Stallone, that's what that movie's about. It's about transformation. That's what Frozen is about. It's about transformation. That's what Star Wars is about. It's about the two sensibilities that I'm describing. All the myths that are out there are teaching what we're talking about today because we can't hear it. It's so foreign to our ears. The only way that we can hear it is through story and symbol. And as I heard Deepak Chopra say one time, you plant the seed, you take the Superman mythology, right? You get done watching a Superman and you feel like Superman. That's part of it. You take that Superman mythology, the image of that hero, you plant it in yourself and you let it grow. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to. That's why I do podcasts and talk about the same things in many different ways over and over again, because it's to provide the listener with an immersive process into a different way of thinking than what the dominant culture has taught us, what my upbringing taught me, what most upbringing taught them, most people's upbringing taught them. All right, next question, another two-parter. Somebody writes, "I come from an affluent family and literally had two different relatives commit to paying for my daughter's college education. We trusted them and stopped saving. Now one says there are legal issues, and the other says that he didn't realize that she wanted to go to school to be a therapist. She thought she'd want a real job." I love that. "So now all of us are caught unprepared, and my daughter is very stressed. We rarely see each other in person, but got together for Easter. When I mentioned talking to them about these things, my cousin told me something you have to just let go for the greater good, and told me I shouldn't implode Easter." Part 2. "This hurt me. It's not my character to implode things, and I felt like I was treated poorly by them, not vice versa. Our family pattern is for the people with power to behave badly and for the people without power to be thankful and kind. I want to be a good family member." I'm going to highlight that. I want to be a, quote, good family member. "But now that I am living a more authentic life, It's really hard for me to take one for the team. I want to advocate for myself and my teen. I think this is the hardest part of the journey. I guess it's the wisdom to know the difference part of the serenity prayer. I feel like advocacy should happen. Should, right? I feel like advocacy should happen, but I have no idea how to step out of my usual family role. I mean, you're presenting the problem. I'm going to use my daughter, when I watched it with her this week, she wanted to make a bet with me that I would use the Truman Show this week in my therapeutic work, and this is the first time I'm using it. When Truman, played by Jim Carrey, was trying to get out of it, the guy that was the director and the designer and the creator of this experiment with Truman inside of this dome, he nearly killed Truman to stop him from going, from stopping him from leaving the bubble. In other words, he was threatened and intimidated to stay within the circle, within the family and the family rules and the family expectations. And at first you watch it and you think the director is played by Ed Harris. You think Ed Harris's character is, I think his name is Christoph. You think he's cruel, and he is cruel. But you realize that's what it feels like when you're breaking free of old paradigms. It feels like you might not make it. It is a death. In storytelling mythology, the death event is the symbol for total transformation. So I don't know what you should do. And I'm definitely not interested in you being a good family member. I'm not interested in my children being good family members. I practice to be interested in them being themselves. So I think you have it all. You have a clear, your ability to describe it even in your question is you know it. They're trying to punish you and threaten you to stay within the family and not implode things. Now, would you need to blow up Easter? Maybe not, but you might not come next time. Even though it causes you guilt because you're bad. That's Jim Carrey's character breaking out of the dome, right? And he's told if he does, there's nothing out there, first of all. He's told by everybody inside the dome, there's nothing outside the dome. It's worse out there. It is meant to be a metaphor for your question. It's all of our questions. You know, when Steve Jobs when Apple produced that commercial called Think Different, it was narrated by one version was narrated by Steve Jobs, the other one was narrated by Richard Dreyfuss. Just type Apple Think Different if you haven't seen it. And he reads a poem called Here's to the Crazy Ones, the Rule Breakers, the Misfits, the Rebels, Bob Dylan, Picasso, Martha Graham. And it's not that I'm going to become a modern dancer like Martha Graham. It's that she showed me what it was like to break out of convention. If Pablo Picasso had followed the rules, we wouldn't have Picasso's works. If Bob Dylan went along with what people told him to do, we wouldn't have Dylan. If Steve Jobs didn't tell the guy at DuPont, I need you to invent something that doesn't exist, we wouldn't have the iPhone or any of the other smartphones for that matter, just to make the point more. So it is a heroic journey to go outside of what is allowed. It really is. And once you read or learn about the hero's journey for a simple but fairly comprehensive telling of the hero's journey, watch, and Becky, you can put a link in here, watch Finding Joe on YouTube. It's an hour and 10 minutes to learn about this idea about what the myths are trying to teach us, all the way back from Greek mythology to present day novels. They're trying to teach us about transformation, which means we have to kill the old self. Joseph Campbell said you have to be willing to let go of the life you had planned so as to make yourself available to the life that is waiting for you. That's what it's about. And the dragon that will stand guard and tell you that you will die, that's the should. That's what your family, what your culture tells you will happen to you if you leave. Somebody writes, I have a young adult child who can be extremely difficult and argumentative. She has been through wilderness and a transitional program. She's in college now and does not live with us. We all agree this is best. However, when she is with us and does not get her way, she cannot accept it. Her behaviors range from crying, screaming, name calling to an all out temper tantrum. There is no reasoning with her and no compromising. My husband and I try to remain calm and stick to our boundaries, but she's relentless. At a certain point, we sometimes will say, okay, we'll discuss it later, or something that will just get her to calm down. We know it's wrong, but if we don't, it will never end. I don't think it's wrong, by the way. I don't think it's wrong. It's just you managing your life. How do you suggest we handle it? If we try to walk away, she follows. It's not always convenient to leave the house. When she's with us, she's staying in our home because she lives out of state. 9 times out of 10, we do not give up. We do not give in. But I don't ever want to give up my power to her. Help. Thank you for posting the link, Becky. That's the link. Save that for later, folks. I can't tell you what to do. You'll notice that from my work, books, podcasts, broadcasts, I'm not a big fan of telling people what to do because it's just another should. But the shift in thinking is you have to take care of yourself. And if somebody's abusing you, the only way to show them what you need is to enforce it. You're going to lose in the short game, but yeah, you can expand your capacity. You can learn to have more capacity with her, I'm sure, through your own personal growth and in therapy. But you guys, the goal isn't to be omnipotent. The goal isn't to be able to tolerate anything. In fact, tolerating anything probably wouldn't be good for children. They have to learn to live with an other, capital O, other. And other people have other needs and other feelings. And part of the mistake that we make in this work, and I think I've contributed to it at times by the way that I teach, is because I'm big on expanding capacity, because this work really expands capacity. I have much, much, much more capacity now than I did 20 years ago for the people that I love and that I serve in my life. Much, much more. I'm much more capable of loving and being patient with them. But, however, it's really important for you to be a self first, and a self has needs. And I know it's dramatic, but it's okay for your child to experience your needs and the associated boundaries. Not only is it valuable, but it's critical. And she, from your description, is abusing you. And in a way, by your selflessness, you're telling her it's okay. You're allowing her to come in your house, and she's learning, I can abuse people when it doesn't go my way, and I can bully them into submission. Right? You don't want her to learn that. You're not trying to set the boundaries to teach her, but they do teach her. So the first task, when I wrote The Audacity to Be You, and I kind of just went through my mind, what would the chapters be? The first task, and I make a big point of this in that chapter on finding you, is you've got to be a self. And I write in there that codependency or anxiety, anxious attachment, it's not loving too much. It's not having enough of a self. They have to bump up against somebody to experience otherness. And right now, you're trying so hard to be the good parent, the patient parent, the loving parent. You probably believe and might have even thought from listening to me that would heal her, but that's not your job to heal her. That's her job. It's not your job to make her happy. That's her job. It's not my job to make my wife happy. It's her job. It's not her job to make me happy. That's my job. You get it, right? You learn to be a self, to have needs. That's why I can't tell you folks when to kick a kid out of the house, or if you should drug test your young adult who comes home. Well, I can't tell you that because I'm not you. And this isn't about being Brad or being right or doing what Freud says or Brene Brown says. It's about being you. And that's your life's task. You're burdened with the responsibility to live your life as you. So what you decide and what you need is what you decide and what you need. If our children need us to have ultimate, endless capacity, they are all doomed 100%. Let me say that again. If our children need us to have all capacity, they are doomed. Life is hopeless for them because none of us have it all. We just have a self. And as we do this work, that self gets larger, right? The Dalai Lama is probably more patient than me. Probably. That's because he's done more work than me. He's got a longer and richer practice than I have. He probably also takes care of himself better, which means he's quote unquote selfish. All right, last question before I wrap up for this evening. How important do you feel it is for an educational consultant to be involved in aftercare placement post-evoke from the perspective of a therapeutic boarding school? I understand that they are typically used to making referrals, so I'm just curious on your thoughts surrounding this. We have not hired an educational consultant, and we're comfortable with that. It's your choice. I will only say it this way. When I needed help for my son, my firstborn son, who's now 29, when he was 14, I hired a consultant that I respected, who doesn't practice anymore, who's retired since then, and paid them full price for it because I value that role as a quality assurance advocate, as another voice that's independent. The full title of their organization is Independent Educational Consultants Association, IECA. So I value it for me. I can complain to her, which I did, about what the therapist was or wasn't doing, and she could give me feedback independent of the therapist. I had been in the field at the time. This was my son was 14, that's 15 years. I'd been in the field for 10 years. So it wasn't that I was ignorant to programs that were available. I was just too close. I asked my therapist a few weeks back about something about her son, and she said something that was so empowering to me. She said, I'm too close to him. It's hard for me. Her son he's an attorney at the Department of Justice. He's an adult now with several children. And I was trying to learn something about parenting psychology. So I asked her a question, and she said, I think I'm too close to it. I just recognized recently with my adult children that I have huge blind spots in my analysis of them, right? So that consultant provides that. You don't have to do it. It can be a tool. If money is short, that might be the place where you cut. All of that is true. I can just tell you that I found value in it. And I find value in it when I'm working with them as a professional also. And some are better than others. And some are a good fit for you and others aren't also. So it's not just about who's better or not, but it's also about a good fit. All right. Let me wrap up. The Journey of the Heroic Parent and the Audacity to Be You are available on Amazon and Audible. Our partners, if you want to make any charitable contributions, in fact, I think Choose Mental Health through the end of the month, they have a donor that will match $1 for every dollar that is raised by the end of May. ChooseMentalHealth.org is the place to go. Sky's the Limit Fund.org or EvokeFamilyFoundation.org are places you can go to give back if you would like to. We have support groups online for current and alumni families of our wilderness program and for alumni of our intensive program. If you are a wilderness family, current or alumni, you can go to those. The next offering is May 12th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. We have one per month that is just for alumni parents of wilderness. That one is on May 24th at 6:30 p.m. And if you are an intensive alumni, the next offering is May 10th at 6 p.m. Contact intensives@evoketherapy.com for more information. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, I believe in this as one of the best ways to use your time and money. Is go to a personal intensive, specifically finding you. We have 1 or 2 spots available in May, still available, May 18th through 22. We have a new location in beautiful Midway, Utah, that we'll be hosting them at. If you want to do that, actually contact intensives@evoketherapy.com, and you'll have the pleasure of talking to Becky, who also did an intensive. We have our folks do intensives not because they're struggling, but because it's part of what we do. We believe in doing the work ourselves. I've been to 9 myself. My children have been. My partners have been to it. We've had several therapists go. Many folks from our admissions team. If you want an online offering for Finding You, June 24th through 26th is our next online offering. It's cheaper. It's over the weekend. It's 2.5 days. It's kind of half of the Finding You. So if those variables matter to you, check it out. We have a young adult offering. We've been told that a lot of people would like to be with young adults. So June 10th through 13th is that offering. Just contact intensives at evoketherapy.com. If you would like a coach for you as a parent, as an adult, for your couple relationship, for young adults, even for adolescents, contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. And our attachment trained therapists can offer coaching. We have pursuit trips for families and young adults, anywhere from 3 to 30 days, anywhere in the world, custom designed to meet your needs. Think therapy light with a lot of fun. We ask all current families to go to 6 12-step support groups, any combination of Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, or adult children. You can also go to refugerecovery.org or NAMI.org. On social media, you can find all of these recordings on your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast, also Spotify, or go to soundcloud.com on your computer. You can follow Evoke and me, Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handles at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. At Evoke, you can find our intensives program on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives, or on Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And then, of course, the Evoke Therapy blog has new content each week. My next broadcast will be May 9th. I'll be talking about, I can't wait for this one. I love this one. I've been looking forward to this. The masculine and the feminine energy in each of us. May 9th, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Look forward to that. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. Becky, thanks for hosting tonight. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you and all of you listening, for and on behalf of the people that love you and that you love. Thank you for being willing to do your work, which is the greatest gift you can give to anybody. Take care, folks. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.